Okay, we're here today at the Keswick Island Guest House with our treasured guest, Valda Busseton, who is the daughter of the famed pioneer, Arthur Busseton. Valda was lucky enough to live in the Whitsundays as a child, and she's just going to recount some of her life as it was, in her own words, living here and enjoying the beautiful Whitsundays. Now, Valda, I believe that this would have been a magnificent playground as a child for you.
Yes, it would. We thought everyone had a place like that, with all that water to swim in, all those hills, all those trees to climb, and there were animals, and there were the marine life very handy, and we thought everybody had that like that. And later on, when we got to town, we found out they didn't. They were quite confined, confined space. So we did make the most of it, but we also worked in between, because there was a lot of work to do on a tourist resort.
And you lived out on Brampton Island, which is just 5 minutes here from Keswick Island.
Yes, and it was a great life, but we didn't realise until we left, in many ways.
How long were you there for?
24 years.
24 years. Wow.
Mummy and Dad were there 25. After a year they got me, and I was there too, and my sister Isla was there too afterwards, and there were just the two of us, so we had to have correspondence lessons. Because we had no type of school otherwise in those times. Now they call it School of the Air.
And how did the correspondence
They sent the lessons
classes...
in big packets to us, and we eagerly opened them and did what they said, and posted them back to Brisbane, to the correspondence school in Brisbane, and the teachers down there did a marvellous job. They were great. And when I was 14, I was in Brisbane for the first time, and I met lots of the teachers. Some of them who had sent my lessons. They seemed to stay on there a long while or something. And also they could have, sometimes with some small disabled thing like being a bit deaf or something which they couldn't be in an ordinary school, but they wrote letters to us so they'd get to know us and corrected our things all the time and wrote notes on it, and they did a great job.
So you didn't have to speak into microphones sometimes to your teachers?
We didn't do any of those.
No. That was more in the
future.
future.
Posted them back a little later that came. The only thing we had was broadcasts on the radio. We did have broadcasts to the correspondence school on the radio sometimes, so we listened to the radio. But no, we hadn't got into talking back with the radio.
So when you lived on Brampton, was the resort there then?
Well, they started it, you see. Mummy and Dad started it, so it wasn't there at the first. It grew slowly, grew very slowly and gradually, because it wasn't like a big company coming in and putting in everything. Plonk, plonk, there it is. It wasn't like that. And everything grew slowly. But it did grow, and people came from everywhere. And things were rather primitive, you might say, as opposed to the luxurious ones of today. But they all enjoyed themselves and had a mighty time, so it seemed, and did around what you did on the island without a lot of entertainment or that. Or we had boat trips to Cockermouth and things like that. And we had games in the hall, and we had dancing, and we had things. But it wasn't like today. But they managed, and they seemed to like it, and they came back again. And one lady came 53 times.
53?
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
And she came from in the 40s to in the 90s. She came. Then she said, "I'm too bloody old to come."
She must have loved it as much as
she said,
as
"I've
you
found
did.
the place I want. I've seen Capri, and I've seen all those places, and then I don't interest me anymore. I go to Brampton." So she was always well received. Didn't matter who was owning the island at the time, which in latter years had changed hands a bit, and everybody was very good to her.
And what did you do as a family on the island?
We didn't do much as a family. We were always spread out amongst the other people, amongst the staff and the guests and the animals that had to be attended to and all that kind of thing.
So you were working?
And so we didn't sort of sit down in a house of our own and have our little meals together and all that. We ate with the staff, and after a while Mummy and Dad ate in the dining room. Somebody thought that'd be the right thing, but the rest of us we ate with the staff. And that. So we didn't sort of sit down as a family. But when we went away on trips, when we closed down in what we called the slack season, was the wet season, and you can't go by that now. And when we did that, we went off then together somewhere. And Mummy said
Somewhere
we should
dry.
be able to go anywhere.
Somewhere dry?
We should be able to go somewhere every 2 years, otherwise it's not worth a cracker. We should be able to go. So we went to New Zealand and places like that to have a look round, and we were together then, sort of, you know, or more or less on a ship or whatever. So we did go together then, but on the island, no, we always had the other people with us, sort of thing, you know, and some of the staff we still know that we had. And they're
What a
our
great
friends.
way to meet people.
And they're our friends, and
Yes.
everybody who stayed there fitted in all right. If they didn't fit in, well, you gently shoveled them back to the mainland, because, you know, some fit and some don't.
That's right.
And the ones that fitted, they stayed.
So your dad must have been quite a man of vision.
Oh, yes, yes, and also my Uncle Pidge, we've got Vincent Bay straight across here. Well, that's Pidge. That's Joseph Vincent, and his nickname was Pidge. And he thought of putting the things on Brampton instead of St Bees, because you could see the big flat, all the coconut trees, two beautiful sandy beaches right next to each other like that, Carlisle guarding everything across the channel and sheltering it, and he could see it, and which I like St Bees, but it's just for tourists, not quite the same. And he saw that, and he said that it goes over there, on the one there. But they used to have the horses over there before, the horse trade, and they had to sell the horses to places like Ethiopia and these countries, because they were using horses in those days. This was back in the 20s and 30s. And Dad's uncle, who was with them on St Bees and always knew things, said you mustn't mix them with the sheep. You put them on Brampton. So put them on Brampton. There was nothing on Brampton yet, but there was had the lease. And so they did. They bred these beautiful horses. They bred there and sent them away, put them in the big ships and sent them off. And then after a while it became mechanised. The army that they were sending to in India or what have you became mechanised, so that was the end of that. And they put some of the horses across to Carlisle. Just 4 or 5 years ago, the Parks boys told me we found the last horse dead. It would be, ever since then they'd bred through the years. They had water and they must have just bred through the years. And we didn't see them. They were there. I saw them one day. I was gathering and looking. I wasn't gathering, but I was looking, as I do, for whatever might be on the beachcombing side, going along like this on Carlisle. And I sort of stood up like that, and there's like that umbrella there is this great big black horse standing looking down at me, and I sort of backed off gently, but it didn't do anything. But I sort of backed off gently. It was so close, and I think that's just about the only one I ever saw. Now Helen saw some on Carlisle. She was roaming around there. She saw some.
Were you friends as children?
Well, yes. She came when she was 2 to Brampton with her parents. She's younger than I am, of course. Very agile and very forceful, and tells me what to do. And so the parents came, and then they came again, you know, next year sort of thing, and they came again, and she grew up each year or whatever. She'd have a holiday at Brampton and that, because that's how things went. They liked it there, and the father liked fishing, and we had really good fishing in those days. And so there they were. At one time she did her correspondence lessons too, because the parents said they might be able to manage the engine part of Brampton sort of thing, because that's what he was, the inspector of machinery. Anyway, they thought they'd try Helen out with doing the correspondence lessons, but she was generally outside doing something, so they said it's no good, she's got to go to Brisbane. So they went to Brisbane.
Oh.
She said they didn't tell me what they were up to. So,
Well, she would have behaved.
But Isla and I did ours, and I did mine for 9 years straight with doing the correspondence lessons, and you seemed to get by all right. It was a bit hard if you were not good at arithmetic or something like that, but reading all the things what to do and doing them, that was easy, and I liked them. I liked doing my things all right. But my sister, Isla, she used to like to be out doing something in a dinghy or doing something in the boats or something, if possible, apart from doing the lessons. But you had to. Yes, you had to.
Did you go out in the boats very often?
Oh yes, we took the people on. Well, we went back and forwards to town in the boats, of course. We didn't have anything else, and we went on those. And when the Roylands came on stream, we went on those, which were bigger and handier. But we had always usually had a boat, and that's how we went back and got the stores and did all our things that we had to do in town, and then we also took the people for the day, you see, on just around handy places for trips, and just sort of for lunch, and then back again 5 o'clock time. And that's what we did, you see, yes. Oh, yes, we went on the boats. I say, we went on the boats like people go in their cars. We just got on the boats, and I don't remember when I didn't go on boats, because I was only a few weeks old. So we were quite used to the boats.
So who was living on St Bees around that time?
Yeah, well, in the first place, Grandma and Granddad were there, you see. But then when the war came, people went off to the war, or they were working for the war, or doing something, and there were no industries going on in their normal fashion, and you couldn't get shearers and everything, Dad said, and they sold it in 1940, and then they came across Brampton to us. They were getting a little bit older. They probably weren't any older than what I am now, but we used to think they were old, you know. Of course. And they came across there, and then Dr. Horn got it, Dr. Horn got it, and he had sheep and that for a while, and then a lot of owners had it, one after the other, and the Burkes then were there a long time, and the Burkes were there, and a lot of people were on Keswick, a lot of owners, one after the other, sort of thing. But in the wartime, you see, you couldn't get people to work easily because they weren't around anymore, apparently. But I can't remember going to St Bees except when I was grown up, and we used to come down for the day sometimes. We could come, as you would think, for the day, and show them the crema if the crema was still above water, which it stayed for ages. It stayed for years. We didn't ever think it'd sort of fall off. We weren't frightened to get on it.
Was it your father who used to get people to come out here and have a cup of tea on the deck?
Well, yes, that would be
little
true.
tours
That would
on
be
the
true.
crema?
We came over from Brampton for the day. That's how we come to be there, you see. And then Dad said, 30 years we were at St Bees, and what happens after that? A big ship comes up and gets on there. But anyway, then we would put the people there, and we would all run about and have a great old day. And I thought, since then I thought, you're never going to get something like that again, are you?
Never.
You know? And I remember looking down. I must have walked down a couple of decks, obviously, or something, and here were the motors, and here were the fish, swimming amongst the motors like that. And I thought, well, that's something, even though I was very young still. And we could put our boat in between the crema and the cliff, big cliff. You could put so the other day when we were on the dive boat, we were nearly up to the crema, so to speak, but we couldn't go any further. It was getting woolly water round a bit, and he quite wisely came back. But that's the nearest I'd been in a long while. But my niece, Gail, she has dived on it with a dive club, and so she knows what it looks like, sort of thing. But it was very interesting to walk about and think, well, here we are, and we could, do what we liked, and then just hop on the boat and go back to Brampton. And then we used to come round and see whoever was at the homestead, usually. But we sort of didn't come to Keswick because there wasn't anything much here then, so to speak. But I came to Keswick 37 years ago and stayed. That's the last time I was here staying, was 37 years ago.
And who did you stay with?
I stayed with my husband and I in the little greenhouse down right where the airport is there. There were one greenhouse and one caretaker house on the beach, sort of. And that was it, and we had a great time. Yeah, we used to go out on the outboard and everything, and that was, yes, it was quite lovely.
Get oysters?
Looked down and you could see cockermouth just looking along the channel there. And that, well, I don't think we got any oysters, no. But we enjoyed ourselves immensely, and we came back another time, and then Mummy and Dad and Frank and I came for Christmas one time too, and we thought it was one of the nicest ones we had. It was quiet and it was good. It was only ourselves and the caretakers, and the dog, which had been hurt by a bulldozer accident and sent off to the vet in town, and on Christmas Day out came the dog out of the plane, all mended and all good again, so that was good. And there was one goat, so I'd milked cows, but I'd never milked a goat, so I had to milk Mummy goat and see what it was like.
How was that?
Well, the first time was a strange thing. I didn't know much about goats. The first time I tried the milk, they were giving me the milk in a jug, the people saying that, and I used to give it to the dog, who used to call in, because it tasted funny. And when I was there the next time, it was a drought, you see. When I was there the next time, there'd been rain and the grass was right and it tasted all right. not, I wouldn't say like cow's milk, but it was all right, but yes. So the grass made a difference, you see.
Absolutely.
Well, it might with people, I don't know, might with people.
And there were always goats on St. Bees, weren't there?
Oh yes, yes, and they had, I think they had a couple of thousand at one stage. So somebody on Parks and Wildlife or somebody told me, and they were shooting them, and they were told to shoot them. Well, now they say they've nearly shot them all, and not a real lot left, but you wouldn't think a few wouldn't hurt, but
No,
I know they
to, especially to eat the weeds and the...
yes, they do
you know,
breed. You think,
things like
well, you don't let them get out of hand. The parks will see to that, although they don't have the personnel, I understand, as what we had back a few years ago. Not the personnel. They're cutting on the personnel a bit. But anyway, then we came, Helen and I came last year, and we came the year before over to St. Bees. And they had the first time, they just about burnt us out with a barbecue. They just about barbecued us.
Wow.
That park started up a fire on the hill as you see, poking out that way. And next thing down, it came, and then it's night time, and all the sparks are coming off, and they're coming on top of our house. Helen said we should be evacuated from here. And she rang up the boys on the boat, which were here at Keswick. And the boys did come over, but they didn't do anything. They said, look, it'll burn itself out. So it did after a while. You see, being there, you're right above the beach. I said, I can walk out to the beach if I have to. I'm not terribly alarmed. You know, if you were in a 10-floor place, you'd think, wouldn't you? But I'm not. So I said, I can just walk out there if I have to walk out. It was fierce, quite fierce. And in the morning, of course, what a mess, all black, you know, all the hill all black. But they do that every so often. They burn it all off. It had got too far, I think, than what they had expected.
Wind must have picked up.
Yeah, but anyway, Helen tuned them up, had them over, and they came. They had to come. They were in their boat. Oh yeah, so that was something.
And do you remember many of the visitors that you've had over the years?
Oh yes, I've got the visitors' books. I've got a lot of the visitors' books. Maybe not all, but I have got a lot. And some I remember, and some I say, oh yes, fancy that, you know. And some that are still around town, and I say, you know, you were in the visitors' book for 1955 or something, you know.
Any famous people?
Not terribly really, not terribly famous. The only one came ashore that my mother wasn't too sure of was during the war, and he came out of a boat. How they did, you know, on the front beach. Hello, here we are, sort of. And all the brass and everything, and all in the uniform and everything, and the brass. And he said, hello, my name's Blamey. And my mother said, not the general by any chance. And he said, oh no, I'm a lieutenant or what have you, you know. So he wasn't famous. He was big army brass, coming ashore just for the sake of it, not for anything in particular. And so they always used to come and have morning tea. Anybody who came in, that's how it was in those times. You know, it's not the same now.
Very hospitable in those days.
Not the same now. And so anyway, he was there. Well, there was. Would you remember Bob Dyer, Bob and Dolly Dyer, and the picker box?
Sure do.
All the things.
Yes.
Well, they came just after we left, and they were there in McLean's time, and we had our own cottage there still that we'd kept in the agreement, and we were there. And Bob and Dole, they were there, and we met them and everything, and they were very nice, really, really nice they were, and he scout fishing and everything, as you would expect, and there was Bob and Dole and Mrs. Mack, her mother, and so yes, we met them quite a bit, you could say. Well, nowadays people would say, well, who's that, you see, but you didn't.
They were famous, they had that
they were
amazing
good.
show.
They were good. They met about 10 days or something like that and got married. And it lasted as good as gold.
Love at first sight.
They didn't have children, see, to annoy them. They just had themselves, and they were happy as fleas. Yeah. And anyway, yes, and he had asked, but I remember he had asked in the papers for a quiet funeral. He wanted a quiet funeral, and that's what he had, and there wasn't a lot said at the time. No, they were quite nice, those three people. And then there was one called Ernestine Hill who wrote many Australian books, very Australian books about the Northern Territory, and Matthew Flinders and different things. And she was a very good writer. And rather sort of in the category of a classic, you know, that's kept, so that books are kept sort of thing. And she was there. She was there about 2 or 3 months or something, and we put her in a room of her own so she'd have her typewriter and everything. She was always doing something. And she was very nice and everything like that. Anyway, she just went off and never paid a thing.
Really?
No. We found out later that was a bit of a characteristic of her. My mother said, oh, you know, one of those artistic people, you know, she'll send it later.
Oh,
but that's how it goes. But she was very nice to talk to and everything like that. And we got our photo taken with her and all that. Ernestine Hill. She was a famous writer. But no one else really stands out that I've forgotten. Since then, they've had more people like John Farnham, the pop star, and different pop stars and things. As the place got more jazzed up, sort of, they've had a few celebrities, I suppose you could say. Not in a great big way, but there have been more. John Farnham used to come a lot. He used to come. And
I can see the attraction.
and the other one that's got a Hey, it's Saturday. Hey, it's Saturday. I didn't watch that a lot, but Darryl Summers, he was there a lot and everything too. And when the one, he'd been the manager and the assistant manager and he'd been everything, and when he died about 2 years ago, he came up and he put the whole funeral on and put it later at the Clarion Hotel and everything, and the one after, and I was there. And he did everything. So he thought a great deal of this manager. You see, he'd been out fishing with him and all and everything, Darryl Summers. But I mean, I didn't know him. He did sort of come and talk to me. He could come and talk to me and said hello. But it's not a real place where there are celebrities running about a lot.
What do you think of it being vacant now, empty?
Well, there's nothing I can think. They own it, and there it is. I've never seen. It's not been like that in 80 years.
It's a shame,
been a resort, and people have come and they've enjoyed themselves, either in a small way or a bigger way. But they've always enjoyed themselves. Of course, in those days they didn't pay much to stay there 2 weeks or 3 weeks or something. This lady that was coming for the 53 times from Sydney, she said. She said they don't stay long now. She said they stay about 2 nights and then they're gone. And I thought, but madam, the things are a bit more to pay for than when you were here and used to come for 3 weeks, you see. But I know that a lot of people enjoyed it, and it's just a pity. But if they own it, I don't know whether they're allowed to do it or not. Some people say they're not allowed. It's connected with a tourist licence kind of thing, and you can't just leave it go to pieces like that. But they have for 3 years, so I don't know what they can do. I wouldn't know legally, but that's what some people say. Or some people have tried to do something about it, but I don't know.
Isn't it amazing how you live locally in Mackay, don't you?
Yes.
And how you can be there and mention places like Keswick Island and people don't know.
Oh no, they don't like coming on the ocean. Of course you can come in planes now, but also a lot of people don't like coming on the ocean. Something might happen to you, and they go out on those roads. And every couple of weeks somebody gets killed and nobody thinks twice about it. But that's just one thing. But some people say, no, I've said to people, have you ever seen Brampton? Well, I mean, now you've got the planes in the latter years. You had the planes and you had the fast boats, you had everything. It wasn't an ordeal to get there anymore. And they said, oh, no, we'll go there.
Were you around when, or you came out on the Woi Woi?
Yes.
I'm thinking about those big ferries that were around here for a while.
Oh, the Roylands. The Roylands, the 112 feet. Yeah, they're 112 feet. And they were all the same, you see, all matching like peas in a pod, all coming out of the harbour. At one point there were 8 of them. And that was supposed to be the most in Australia of a fair mile fleet. And gradually they got one and got another one, and they adapted it for the passengers, how they wanted it, which was 25 passengers. And the ones I was there were 9 crew. And everybody had a mighty old time. But anyway, the people who came, and then we left Brampton, and then Captain McLean, who owned the Roylands, said, would you go out for 1 week? I'm short of one of the girls. There's 2 girls and 7 men. I'm short of one of the girls. The girls did everything, like being a hostess, but also doing all sorts of things and cleaning the cabins, seeing the people when they were sick and everything else. And yes, and waitressing. And I said, oh yes. So I went for the week and I was there 8 years. And that's exactly what happened.
You must have enjoyed it.
I did not plan it whatsoever, but I was just there. So, and then my sister was there, and my best friend who's in Mackay, she was there too. She'd been working on Brampton, and we were all there for a while there. Yeah. So that's what happened. And yes, it was quite lovely. As long as you're used to boats, you're going to get it rough sometimes. You can't say, well, I'm not going, it's rough this week. And that's where I learnt you don't take any notice of the weather. You deal with the weather just as it comes, and it's no good saying, oh, it's terrible, because you can't do anything. So we would go out. Some weeks were flat calm, as you know, and perfect, like this here, perfect. And others were shocking, you know. But people had a great time. Once again, they came back again, and they sometimes asked for the boat next year. Did it have the same crew on it because they'd like to go there, and things like that. And they weren't elaborate, they weren't luxurious, but later on they got new ones. They got cats. I wasn't there by then. And they got cats, and they got, they had them air conditioned, and they had bigger cabins, and they had everything. And as time goes on, and they were all right, you see. And then the P&O wouldn't let the Roylands come on the day trips to Brampton, because they said, no, we want it, exclusive. We don't want people walking about, well, they'd been walking about for a lot of years. They hadn't done any harm on the day trip. Some people can afford a day trip and they can't afford to come to stay. But anyway, they said, no people. So that sort of helped to demolish the Roylands off the scene. They were probably getting out of date in some ways, although they'd renewed all the ships. But they did a great job, because it's not easy. It's not easy at all. My friend used to say, at the start of the week, there'd be some that were not happy, But she said, by the time a couple of days had got over, we smoothed them over, didn't we?
And what about cyclones? Were you ever around out here when there was cyclone weather?
The funny thing, mostly I sort of missed them. And the only really one that I was in was at Brampton, and I was about 4. And I was remembering it very clearly, and Dad had put us underneath a great big ping pong table which had a thick sort of base underneath it, and there were 5 or 6 children underneath it, and that sort of made us be safe, and just in case the roof of the big hall went off, which it didn't go, but Dad thought it could have, and it was very fierce wind, and all you could hear were coconut trees getting snapped off and lying down like that, snapped off. That's how I remember the big wind and the coconut trees, and I don't remember much else. But my cousin, I have a cousin that's a couple of years older, and she was there, and she used to live here in Keswick. And she was the first family living in Keswick, her family, and she said, yes, she said, we were under the table and the trees were snapping off, and she remembered it better than what I did. But when I'm in town, I've gone somewhere for a holiday, and then they've had the cyclone while I've been away, I've sort of missed it. And Cyclone Ada, I was up in Townsville, off Townsville in a boat, and Cyclone Ada was smashing up Hayman and South Mole and all of those, so I didn't see that either. That was pretty bad. Well, people got killed, and mainly because people were doing the wrong thing. They sent the boats out and everything instead of cancelling the boats and saying everything stops.
Yes.
And after that, they used to say everything stops, and the boats go into Nara until it's over, until this warning is over. But then they didn't. They ran the boats across, and crew got killed and drowned and everything. It was just wrong, you see. Somebody was in charge that wasn't aware what a cyclone was like, I think. So I didn't actually see one except that one at Brampton. And then Ului, to the last one that we had, it sort of went to Airlie sort of thing, and along there and broke some things up in Prosy and Airlie and that. But it was a very big wind in North Mackay as I saw it, and the wall was shaking, and nothing happened. And I thought, when I go out in the yard in the morning, there'll be, goodness knows what I'll see. There wasn't anything. It wasn't bad. But it was frightening, because you see what it can do, and I think you don't have anywhere to go. There's no particular cyclone place to go to, and they say, go to your friends that have got a high place and all this, and well, who's going to drive around with all the branches falling off the trees and everything? Who's going to drive you there? No, you might as well stay in your place. And it's been there for I don't know how long. I can't find out how old the house is. So people say, it has seen a lot of cyclones. Once got through them all right.
Thank goodness for cyclone rated rating built houses.
So it was built long before they thought of doing anything like that, I'd say. But it must have been. It's low. It's low. It's not up in the air. And I remember the walls. I'm thinking those walls. No, it's very frightening because you're aware of just what might happen. You don't take them lightly, but it's no good sort of being terrified. You try and just put your pot plants inside or somewhere like that. They're going to get blown away down the street and go through someone's windows or something. If you want to, you can tape the windows, but I've never taped the windows. Nothing happened to the windows. So, no, and we don't get them that often. Well, I mean, this year we didn't get one. Not one.
Five.
They said we'd get 5, and nothing crossed the coast at all. But, well, they might think that. I don't know. But no, I wouldn't like to be in a really bad one, certainly. You see, Dad was here in 1918 when the big one came.
To Sabine.
Oh, yes, he was there. And it came everywhere in 1918. And he had just come from school. He was 17 or something. And he was there with his uncle, and the roof started to come off the house. And they thought, oh, you know, it's a big blow and it's just on St. Bees sort of thing, and they didn't know it was a flattened Mackay and put a flood all through it and all that kind of thing. It was an extra bad one. And he could remember the book he was reading. Isn't that something?
Right.
The book he was reading was a steel rud book. That was the name of the author. And he said the next thing, the roof started to go off. So anyway, then the house practically got demolished, the old house they had at St. Bees. And then they went down to the creek where they had the boat. They're small boats in those times. They had lots of food in it they'd brought from town and everything, and it was in there, so they had food. And then in a couple of days, they would have had to wait a couple of days for the sea to ease off a bit, I would think. And off they went to town, and they got the river. And here was the bridge all smashed down, and here was the boats all up on the hard over the other side and everything, and all, and they couldn't believe their eyes, you see, because you didn't have the TV and the radio and all that then. But they had a first radio a long time ago in St. Bees, because they had, I think this point down here is Langton Point, and that was the man that put the first radio on St. Bees when they were there.
Oh, really?
And he was there, and he brought over the radio and everything in pieces, Dad said. Dad said, now I've got to put this together. But this was, I suppose, early 30s or something. And all the ones standing around, mainly his relatives, said, no, there's no way you'll put that thing together. And he said, but I did put it together. He put it together, and then he had, you know, the big speaker and all, and away went the radio. Yeah, so they did have the radio after that. Yeah.
Was he ever involved in any rescues, sea rescues, where people were in distress?
A couple of times in a boat where they were helping to search for people off the coast, and also Pidge, my uncle, he went in a plane with the plane pilot and everything once, and they looked around. They never ever saw that boat or the people again, but they searched a lot, just the same as they do today, and they've got more sophisticated things today to go with and to radio and to do everything. But they went in planes and looked, and they never saw it. It went from Mackay and it was going to the Percy's. Never saw the people or the boat or anything off it. They saw a drum, I think, a fuel drum or something. That was it. There's a lot of ocean there, isn't there?
There is.
Yeah.
There is. And when you were married, what did your husband think of coming out to the islands?
Well, he was familiar because he was a Royal skipper, and he was a seagoing person from New South Wales in the first place. But he had worked on the river boats with Dad, when sort of a generation before me sort of thing, and when he was a young lad, and so he was used to everything around. It was no surprise to him. And he used to go on those runs to Green Island and Townsville, Magnetic Island and all that. He did those for years too, up there, before I knew him. But when Dad heard he was coming to the Royals, Dad said, oh, Frank Windsor, oh yes, I know him. I thought, goodness, he must be fairly long in the tooth, because that was a long time ago. He was older than me, but he was still with it. And so there it was, yes. So he was on there. I was on the Royals first, and he came there later. And a lot of people, there must have been hundreds of people that were crew on those Royals over the years. Some came and some went. Some were cooks and everything, and deckhands and everything. Some only stayed a week and they couldn't stand it, and others stayed ages, you know. So there were a lot. People often saying, well, these worked on the Royals. I say, look, You wouldn't know everybody that did, because there were different ships that you were on, not all the same ones. And if the captain didn't like you, you could say, I'll see that you go on the other boat next week. Could do that too. But they had a great fleet. I mean, they really did, because it took a lot of work and money to get there, sort of thing. But it's like the islands. Some are useful to you, and some aren't going to be useful to you. And I don't know how the cooks got on. I mean, the cooks, they rolled around. I mean, they stopped here sometimes, but stopped every day and went ashore at the islands and all. But they rolled. But anyway.
Do you have a favourite out of all the islands?
Oh, there's only one. There's only one. It's over there and got nothing on it.
Which is?
Except trees.
Which is which?
Brampton.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Well, that's because that's where you live. Then you can't, half your head and half your mind is all there, always. Doesn't matter where else.
And your heart?
You know, sort of thing. Yeah. But I mean, I don't let it bother me. That I accept the fact that they can do what they like, or so it seems, and that's how it is. I'll accept it. But I would like to sort of just have a little look. But I know what it's like, because people have told me. They called in on boats, and they said, it's a mess, it's a terrible mess. I said, I know it's not the same as it used to be, but I said, still like to just call in, sort of thing. But we haven't got a boat. We haven't got a boat now to go in. So,
Yeah, it's just a half-hour little trip from here, isn't it?
and it's handy in the, yes, don't worry, Helen's thought of that. And it's, she's enterprising, and it's, the planes are going, but I don't know whether they maintain the strip, because there'd be strict regulations about the strip. You can't just go and sit down on the strip and come up.
No.
And so I don't know what the regulations are about the strip. We've thought of that too. We thought we'd fly over for the day, come back in the afternoon, you know. But we don't know. I don't know whether we'll ever make it. But however, we had a lot of times there. We had a lot of times there when we lived there and after. We went over. All of us still went over in some way or another and stayed a little while, you know, and enjoyed it. It didn't matter what they were doing or who owned it. Well, you don't let it bother you. But most of them were all, they were all sort of for the good of the place, because that's what they were there for. But these new ones, they're a new kettle of fish. So people said, oh, is it just, you know, they don't want to have anything there, you know. Well, what would you have a place like that for? But anyway.
Do you think the Whitsundays is a good area to bring children up to, a good place to grow up in?
Well, it would depend what you were doing, I suppose, sort of thing. But I don't see that it would be. When they got bigger, they would have to go to high school or something like that. But when they were young, it'd be great. Yes, they'd have to go to higher education and all, which you have now, which I didn't have a lot of. And so yes, they have great times. And that, but they're not family places anymore. They're company places, and so I don't know what happens on the other islands. Who lives there? But there could be managers' children or something like that. Might live there, the likes of Daydream and those kind of ones. We went to Daydream for Christmas one time. It was very nice, very small, and everything organised in the small space, as opposed to these very small. But 5 pools, I think, because you can't walk on the corally beach, it's so corally. But I thought it was, you know, very well run, it was.
What do you think of this place, or the guest house here?
Oh, well, I hope it does all right. Yeah, I hope so.
And you're quite comfortable when you come and stay?
You'll get us, I should think so. If you're not, well, when will you be? yes, when will you be?
And you get enough to eat, obviously.
Oh, get enough to eat. You don't mention the food. We can't deal with the food, it's too much.
But it's good.
No, it's very lovely. It's very lovely, and I hope it does well, and get some people that keep it going, because you have to have people. It doesn't matter how nice you've got a thing, you still have to have the customers, don't you? Coming, but the customers come from Holland, from Netherlands. They seem to like it all right. A certain amount of people that say, "What's here? What's here? There's nothing here." I mean, you know.
It's a quiet getaway. It's for people who are non-commercial, isn't it?
Get the right people that don't want a big resort with everything jazzing around. But these days people are brought up to believe that they must have everything playing there, daytime and nighttime, playing and entertaining you, and they don't find their own things like that. I mean, nobody could have gone, and a lot of people couldn't have gone as Helen as I did for 2 weeks the first time over to St. Bees. We didn't have a boat to get out anywhere in all that. We had the house and the beach and the water. that was about it, you know. But we were happy. But some people would think, oh, I'll get driven up the wall, wouldn't I?
They would. But you make your own entertainment, don't you?
Yeah, well, we
Don't you what you
were
make
able to do that because we sort of grew up with it, but now it's different people. Somebody said it last night, they said, some of the young ones that are growing, they're used to the screens with everything on it and all the entertainment and everything on it. It is different people in that sense, you see. But so, if those people come from overseas, they'd like it here, I'm sure. It'd be a change from those countries over there, I would think.
And you can there's always a book to read, something to read.
No, but they cater
go for
them
a
very
walk.
well, and they cater them very nicely. They cater for them, and the people, some of the people, if you get the right people, it should be all right to go along. But some of our ordinary ones, no, they'd want goodness knows what. I think, you know.
It's good to up here when you go for a hike and you go over a hill and you go, wow, look at that view. Oh, the views are just amazing from
The
every
view from
different
that
spot.
Helen's house, as she calls it, up the thing there, is, she's ambitious, is stunning. Any of those views, whichever way you look at it, it is somehow. Yeah, she said that the chiropractor one has both. He has that side and that side. See?
Oh yes, that's a beautiful house, that one.
But dear, it's right on the top. But then some of the first people think, what about a cyclone or what about a real big wind? Well, you can't base your life around that. You have to deal with it when it comes. And we don't get them regularly every year of that. We
That's
go
right.
ages without having a
That's
had
right.
one. And they often escape Mackay. They often start coming in out of the Coral Sea and all, and they're saying, now they're coming, and they give you the position and everything, and then the next thing, it sort of goes and goes away from Mackay. And it's done that a
Someone
lot
up
of
there's
times.
watching over us.
It's done that a lot of times, you know, but they don't depend on it, but it's done it a lot of times. So it's not as bad as up north, further, which is more in the cyclone belt, I think. So there's always something. What are the people with the floods and all down south? Well, we don't have them.
No.
There has been floods in Mackay, but you don't get them all the time.
And you'd never get it out here. It's too hilly.
Or you wouldn't get it out here. You've got the hills, you see, so you're right with that. One thing you wouldn't get is a flood. But in '08, we got, they interfered with the goose ponds, which is a piece of Vines Creek there, sort of. And the council, I'm talking about, interfered with the goose ponds, I'm told, in some way. And it sent the water down some of the streets. And it wasn't the river, it wasn't the Pioneer River that came over. It was this water all coming down the streets. And I looked out and I opened the door at 6 in the morning. I listened on the radio. It was heavy rain as well. And I looked, and I'll never forget that. Wherever I saw was water. Water in the street, water on the footpaths, water on the roads, water. And I thought, how deep is that water? Actually, it was only about that deep. But it looked spectacular when you looked, and all you could see was water in the houses coming out of the water. And I thought, I've got 4 steps at the front. I thought, is it coming up? It was down there. Is it coming up those steps? Do I put things on tables? Or what? Or it all just started to run away down the gutters. Yeah, with that. That's what happened. But it was spectacular when I looked. But it wasn't in the houses or anything like that time. It was in some of the streets that were blocking the traffic, sort of, on the streets. But then they blamed the council for that. They said they interfered with things. We've got the Vines Creek right beside us, just across the road. But it doesn't come out. It's way down there, the water. People rang up. That day and the next day, 19 people rang me to see if I was all right. I was very touched. And they thought, oh, she's by herself. Did all that water come out the creek? It was way down there. It was just that water coming down the street, and they just ran away. One bloke got out from opposite, got out his surfboard, and he's going to go down the gutter on his surfboard, and it started to run away, and he was had it. So it didn't happen. Didn't happen at all. But that's the only flood you could say that I ever saw, and it wasn't dangerous. But the Pioneer can come up if you get big rain. It can come up and run over a bit around streets and things. But so look at those people down south. It was amazing, you know, and that was like that. No, it's not too bad for the location that it's in. Now it'll be interesting to see if anything does happen at Brampton. It doesn't seem as if it's going to happen in a rush. They've got a lot of money because they've got all those service stations. And the Bear Shop, which is on Harbour Road. And a lot of things, I suppose, that I don't know about. But they don't want to do anything. It doesn't seem. We thought, oh, there's going to be a 6-star resort. We can't go anyway. And sure enough, there's nothing. So one never knows what's
Yes.
happening.
Well, thank goodness the ocean is an open place that anyone can go, and that there are other places close by that aren't
The
far from
ocean is
Mackay.
fairly free while you're going along on the ocean, and I suppose the marina would be dear, very dear, the marina. But while you go along on the ocean, you can anchor somewhere, yes, and anchor amongst the islands and that, and nobody's going to bother you. There aren't many places. Don't think there are many places cut off like the one here. They want to save the coral. Don't anchor inside of those buoys when you're up near the crema. The dive man showed us. But there's most places you can go along, and as you say, it's pretty free for all, yes, you see, which is a good thing. You see, the thing was that we had a boat afterwards. We went fishing out of Townsville, and it was very well. We were there for 8 years, and we reckon it was the happiest 8 years of our lives. We liked being on the boat and all. It had its up and down, naturally, being the ocean. You had storms and this and that, and you went way out to the reef and that in this boat, and it was an old boat. But it always got there, didn't have to get towed.
What was the boat's name?
And Omar.
Omar.
And it didn't have to ever get towed, so that was all right. And we got fish that was, we sold it to the fish port in Townsville. Frank wanted to do that after we sort of left the Roylands. I didn't like killing the fishes. I didn't like killing the fish. I would never do it again. I didn't have to, but I knew that's what we were going to do, so you had to. And only 2 of us. And then on the worst days is when you've got all the beautiful sweetlip, you've got to stab them, and that's terrible. But that's how the fish board wants it. They want it white. So that's what we did. So, and we managed all right. And that, you know. And then one time we got in a big storm, and a really big storm at the reef. And anyway, we got away from the reef and that and everything. Night time. It's always night time, and got away. And I looked out, but before that, I looked out like that, and I'm sitting here, and here's the wheel here, and here's me on the seat. And I looked down, and it was all coral. I didn't want to see coral then. I don't mind coral, but I didn't want to see coral real close like that to the bottom. I thought, oh my God, we've gone over the edge. And I was so frightened I could hardly say anything. And finally I said, come on, up the anchor goes, we're going. We're off back to port. And we were. And it was very rolling and very sort of frightening. And when you got in the lightning was real strong, and you were out on the deck, and you had to hold the metal rails. And I used to think, but you don't hold metal, do you? You can get struck with lightning. Well, what are you going to do? There's nobody else there. I'm out there, and he's up there at the anchor telling me what to do. So it was all right, and we got out and we got back, you see, because you just took those as all right, something that happened. It didn't happen every day. And then we got back, and then my uncle came over, Uncle Mick, that used to be on St. Bees, and used to be here living at Keswick as the first person. And anyway, he came over in the dinghy, and he said, you know, how'd things go? We said, oh, you know. I said, well, I said, I thought that this was going to be it. I said, for a while there, I thought this is it. And Mickey said, oh no, you know, God didn't mean you to die yet. And I said, he could have fooled me. But you see, next week he went out again just the same, and you know that some of these things can happen. You can't always know what's going to happen to you the next few days, and you're out there for about 10 days or something. So, yes, we got those fish, and we didn't catch anything spectacular. Oh, I had 2 hooks on, and I caught a sweetlip there, and a sweetlip there, and in between I caught a sweetlip threaded on the line in between. Now that was something. Wasn't that something?
that is something.
I looked, I said, hey, look, have a look at this. Yeah. One got himself
Pretty good.
Got himself in between, and he didn't even have a hook. He had the 2 hooks. So you see, you have all these little tricks when you're desperate.
Absolutely. Well, it's been a pleasure talking to you today, Valda. I really appreciate you taking the time out to tell us some of your life. And when I edit this video, I'm going to give you a copy that you can share with your family. And once again, thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of your stay at the guest house.
Well, thank you too, because it's been very nice having you.
Yes, yeah. Thanks, Val. All right.